for coming in. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I get you to introduce yourself. Allocate about 10 minutes for presentation and enough time for any clarification questions from councillors or exec. And just a reminder that this is being filmed and will be available for public access as well. So just conscious of that as well. So if you're happy to proceed, then I'll just get you to introduce yourself and then over to you.
Okay, thanks, Shane. So my name's Bill Heath. I grew up on the property in Kingston and I managed that for a period of about 10 years prior to the acquisition, and I was the principal representative for the owners, my mother and aunt. And this is Catherine Dooley, my partner, who lived with me for 10 years on the property before it was acquired. Thanks for the opportunity to present something. Can I just ask, has everyone received a full copy, or are you presented with summaries, or what's councillors?
Full copy.
And can I just have some acknowledgement whether people have read the presentation? Is that possible? So has anyone not read the submission?
I will admit I have skimmed over it, not in detail.
Okay.
Likewise.
Likewise? Okay, all right. Yeah, so perhaps the people who've skimmed might be significant to go back and have a read of the material, unless you're very good skimmers and you've got a good sense of what's there. So my reason for presenting was that I felt in some sense the property is a bit of a problem to the council. It's both an opportunity and a problem. It's a large parcel of land. It's designated very strict planning controls. It's a much larger parcel of land than I think would be required for the council for any industrial uses. But in a sense, the council's ended up with it, and a large part of my submission relates to how the council has got into this position where it has a very large parcel of land on the outskirts of Mooroopna. So I did come to the meeting by accident, actually, when it was discussed at the council a couple of months ago. And I was just concerned a little bit about the process which appeared to be happening, which was council going to invest all the money, providing services to the site, and then in order to encourage people to come, would further discount the land. That seemed to me to be inherently flawed strategy. I would have thought you might discount the land if the developers or land users were going to provide services themselves. That would seem a reasonable approach, but to do both, to service the land and put in all those upfront costs, and then to say, but also to make the land usable, we'll provide discounts and we'll build it and they'll come. That to me seems to be bordering on a delusional optimism. I think unless there's a realistic case for the demand for the whole of the property to be used eventually for the purposes that are intended, then to begin an industrial development on part of the land effectively poisons, in my mind, or prevents at least, development of the land for other uses. So while it seems that if the council continues on an industrial course, there's going to be significant risks and potential problems, whereas I think it's important, given that the council explore alternative uses for the property. And they might have happened, but that's my concern is that the council explore other potential uses of this land and other potential sites for industrial land requirements. So that was my principal point. The rest of the material can be seen as background, but also in a sense to explain that the council doesn't have the land because it wanted to have a large parcel of long-term industrial land that it would develop progressively, over millennia. I say millennia because in one of the council's reports it said that if this land was to be committed for industrial land, there'd be enough industrial land here for the next 1,000 years. So the background is a little bit to provide a sense. Well, council's got this parcel of land. If we think that this is a council-initiated event, then there might be a little bit of momentum to continue with the project. If council understands the background, then the council might say, okay, we see how we've got ourselves into this situation. There's really if there's no commercial reason that we should progress in this way, then I think that it provides council with freedom maybe to make alternative choices. So the large part of the submission is to give an account of the process, as I see it, as to how council has arrived in the current situation. And anyone who reads, maybe skimming, but definitely if you are close reading, I think would have to come to the conclusion that council has acted extremely poorly, if not indefensibly, in a whole range of areas and over an extended period. And I would have thought in a council that claims to promote things like transparency and accountability and integrity, you know, they're all very easy words to put on documents, but they don't have any meaning until they have some cost to the council. And typically those costs are financial and reputational. But if the council is not prepared to risk finances or reputation, then it really ought to take words like transparency and accountability off their documents, because they're meaningless. So I've set out what I think are some of the principal missteps by council. And I think that there ought to be a process, maybe akin to truth-telling. I don't want to appropriate language necessarily from the Indigenous movement, but I think that the council needs to hold itself accountable, at least to acknowledge what it has done. And so I ask the council, in light of the information that I've provided, because I understand, you know, staff turnover, there are a lot of people who are involved in these events have left council, but I still think council has an ongoing obligation to acknowledge its behaviour, and so I would ask the council to perhaps ask the Ombudsman or another body to instigate an investigation into council's behaviour in relation to the acquisition and the events leading up to and subsequent to the acquisition.
Right, thank you for that. Bill, Catherine, did you have any comments or no? Councillors exec, do we have any clarification that we need from Bill or Catherine? Sam?
If I can. And I very much look forward to reading in depth your submission after having heard from you. But I just want to ask, so just to understand that the crux of your submission is against the process that has led to this point, and also that moving forward that the land itself should be used for alternative operations or uses. Is that correct in the first instance? Yeah,
so my understanding is that the land should be serviced and then discounted in the hope that then other people will come and it'll grow and it'll get used. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for me to comment on the accuracy of that, you know, modelling. But certainly the notion that council would invest all the services and then discount the land seems to me to be a pretty poor starting point. You sort of either have one or the other if there's actually a genuine demand.
Okay, so it's not about the land being used for industrial purposes, it's about the process of how we're not giving, but you know what I mean, the way that we're choosing to...
I have concerns about whether there's actually a requirement for the amount of industrial land that is available.
The 1,000 years.
And I'm anxious that the council explore other uses for the land, because the land was only zoned industrial because SPC Admona wanted to take control of it. Mm-hmm. That's why it's zoned the way it is. If that hadn't have happened, and that project fell over, if that hadn't have happened, then the land may have been zoned for other purposes. So what I'm saying is you've got to this position of having all this industrial or freight logistics related zoned land almost by misstep, will I call it. So what I'm saying is, okay, if that hadn't have happened, what's the best use for the land today? and judging from the account that the council's given about servicing the land and then discounting it and hoping other people will come, that to me is a red flag, and suggests that the council should look at other potential uses for the land.
Excellent, that's very fair, and I appreciate that. And sorry, just one more. And do you have any suggested, knowing that area quite well and having been a resident of it for such a long time, do you have any suggestions of what the appropriate use of the land would be?
Well, to me, the obvious possible use of the land is for residential purposes.
Okay.
So the western side of Mooroopna is now effectively, or in a planning sense, encompassed by the proposed ring road, whether that ever, sorry, not the ring road, the bypass, whether that actually happens or not. But what it means is that the land within the alignment of the bypass potentially represents the logical extent of the urban development. So there's a large area there that's within the bypass alignment. I mean, the other thing is there's obviously limitations to land supply at Mooroopna, and I don't think there's any rural residential land available in the Mooroopna area. If there is, it's sort of minimal.
Brilliant, thank you.
So I think it should be looked at for residential purposes.
Excellent, thank you.
Great.
Terrific, thank you. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Kath, for coming in. Just a couple of points of clarification, if I can. One of them was, thank you, Sam, I was going to ask that similar question, the land purposes for. Can I say, Bill, that since the compulsory acquisition, a lot has changed in that period of time, and I guess, you know, pardon the pun, but the landscape has changed, but politically, commercially, industrially, around Greater Shepparton. So I think things have changed in from that point to there. And obviously the bypass as well. I mean, you know, it was all guns blazing way back then in terms of where it was going to be, and also both federally and statewide that they were going to support that as well. But that's fallen over in that regard. So I think that's changed somewhat. Most of the councillors around this table wouldn't have been part of the compulsory acquisition, and we also weren't probably here in the previous term. So in terms of transparency, I think from our council point of view, we've been very open and transparent in regards to GB Link and that particular piece of land. What I can say there, probably the only thing that we would keep from people would be the commercial in confidence with businesses that may be inquiring about it. And sometimes we don't even know that because council officers are working through that process till it gets to a certain stage. So I think we've been very, very transparent in that regard. You've been very articulate with your presentation and that. We're looking at all different aspects of it, you know, and a number of it, when it was put to us on the table, we can say, well, you know, do we sell it up? Do we move it on? Is there not going to be a bypass there? People are crying out, as I said, as things have changed for industrial land. You know, you can't go out to the east very much further. People are asking for industrial land, of course, and residential. So it's probably competing interests and obviously farming land as well, if you like. So just wanted to put, you know, points of clarification was in and around what your vision was that you could see, and you've obviously put that in terms of residential. Obviously, it's a fair way out to come out to make sure that all the services are there for a residential before it even gets to Toolamba. So you still push for residential, knowing that there's competing interests with commercial and industrial.
Well, I understand that there's competing interests. You know, I would say that there would seem to be a clear evidence of demand for large areas of residential land, in my view, than there is for very large parcels of industrial land. The other part I would have said when Sam was asking, I think there's, and perhaps council's done this, but there should be, I think, an examination of the areas that are required for future industrial use and whether they could be met elsewhere. You know, there is a rail spur existing to the east of Shepparton, and that there might be areas around that rail spur that would provide sufficient land. The question about transparency, I appreciate that most of the people in the room weren't involved in council council actions at that period. But I don't think that that means that, you know, my responsibility to the organisation of the council only begins when I take up my role as councillor. So I think there's an organisational responsibility that extends into the past. I mean, you could take John Howard's view that I'm not saying sorry because I didn't take any land off anyone. But John Howard's was the leader of the country, and therefore he had a responsibility to accept responsibility for the actions of the country in its history, and certainly not in its ancient history. So I think when we join organisations, we accept some sort of organisational historical responsibility.
Thanks. Seema.
Thanks, Bill. I think my question was actually an extension of what the Brophy was saying, and partly you have responded to. After listening to you, my understanding is that you do not believe that there is enough industrial land demand, and so this land can be used for other purposes. So I was just wondering that, and again, as I've said, I've not read this report cover to cover, so you might have presented that data, but is there any evidence based that the industrial land demand does not exist?
No, I don't have any reports. I suppose the only report that I could offer was the report the council initiated in 2010 at the time of the acquisition, in which it said, it described the requirement for the industrial land at Mooroopna as approximately 1 acre per year. So to provide this, actually it was probably half an acre per year, so that if the land was to be given over to broader industrial uses, it would be allocating an area that would be sufficient to meet the industrial land in the area for over 1,000 years. I mean, you can take whatever you want away from that. It seemed to me to be a self-serving assessment of the demand. But so my only sense of what the current demand is based on the council's proposal to spend all the money to provide services and then further discount the land to a couple of tenants or acquirers, who then, with the hope that, you know, things will blossom from there. So I don't have an alternative sense of what the demand is. I think I say in the report, I don't have access to those assessments.
Thanks, Seema. Jeff.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for coming in. I was out of all the councillors here, I was the only one that was around in 2010, and I remember the acquisition like it was only yesterday. It was a big issue, and thanks for coming in. Bill, perhaps you may not have read our 2050 plan, which is our up-to-date plan of this general area here of where where all the future planning of industrial, residential, commercial will be, and somebody just mentioned, I think it was Broke mentioned that you know, we're probably restricted out to the south. So the Mooroopna area and Tatura jointly, in my view, would become a very important section for our industrial commercial ventures. In fact, if you look at what's happening over Tatura at the moment, it's exploding in terms of residential development and commercial industrial as well. So Mooroopna's ready to vote in terms of industrial area. Yeah, but anyway, have a look at the 2050 plan. It'll explain it much better than what I'm trying to do.
Very good. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll...
Yeah, Shane, could I just, in response, so a lot of the question's been about industrial land. As I said in my submission, it's difficult for me, and I acknowledge I haven't gone into an analysis of industrial land. I base it principally on council's proposed process. But if you can judge from the submission, it may be that, you know, 20% of my submission is in relation to the proposed use and questions that I have about that, and 80% of it is in relation to the process. And I have got no concerns. If the council decides that the requirement is for industrial land and it commits the land for that purpose, then so be it. But I would be disappointed if the council decided that in the submission, this is information that the council was prepared to walk past. You know, we go to these leadership meetings and they say the standards that you walk past are the standards you accept. So if the council walks past this submission, this is the standard that the council sets for itself in the future. It says this is acceptable behaviour. And it says that not just amongst itself, you know, the entire council staff. And it would be extremely disappointing for me if this council decided that this behaviour was acceptable.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We appreciate you coming in, and obviously yourself as well, Catherine. So, yeah, look, I mean, thank you for your time, and this is a big project, a big asset to council, and no different to yourself. We've all got an expectation of wanting to resolve it one way or another. So thank you for your time and for coming in. So, thank you.
Thank you.